I mean, the boy was about 15 years old, but he stood about 6'2", was chiseled. Well, this day at practice, for some reason, a lot of players had gotten sick. And we had 5 or 6 players that didn't come to school that day, so they couldn't practice. So at practice, there were 9 players there. And I was in my mid-20s, and they said, Coach, why don't you be the 10th player, and we'll just scrimmage? And I'm thinking, you know, I'm in my early to mid-20s. They're in their teens. I can do this, right? So we get out there, we're playing, and the ball goes up, and there's a rebound. I go up as high as I can go up. He goes up about a foot higher than I do. He grabs the ball, comes back, and puts an elbow right under my rib. And I'm out of breath, and I'm doing everything I can do to keep my composure because I feel like falling down in a fetal position. But my point is, here this guy is 15 years old, but he really does have the body of a mature man. Have y'all seen those guys here? And some of these 12 and 13-year-old girls, yeah, y'all know what I'm talking about, right? So, yeah, physically, oftentimes people mature at a very young age, but just because they're mature physically does not mean they've developed that ability to make mature cognitive decisions. Some people are very mentally mature at a young age. Beethoven, at the age of 14, had completed many complex compositions at the age of 14, which just goes again to say that just because a person is young does not mean they haven't developed mentally. So as you'll note, as we go up in age, we see various parts of the brain bluing, but if you'll notice, this prefrontal cortex up here does not mature. Even at age 20, it's not completely matured, which is why many rental car companies will not rent their cars to individuals under 25. Now listen to this. You can be 24 years old and have a Juris Doctorate degree. You can be a practicing lawyer at 25, but there are places who will not rent you their cars because they have found the destructive ability or the destructive capabilities of those under 25. The risk is just too great. So even though they can practice law, they can't rent a car. And guys, at what age did your car insurance go down at? 25. 25. Yeah. Looking forward to that. The amygdala is the site of our emotions. Okay? So the prefrontal cortex, that is going to say, what is the intelligent decision? What is the best decision? If you make this decision today, how is it going to affect you tomorrow? The amygdala says, what do you feel like doing? And here's the key, guys. What Jay Geed found out was that up until about 25, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. And so when a decision has to be made, the impulse is deferred from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala. Therein lies the problem. My prefrontal cortex would ask me the question, what is this decision going to cause to happen tomorrow? Well, that's not fully developed in your kids. And since that's not fully developed, that impulse is deferred to the amygdala. And the amygdala says, man, do what you feel like doing. And so when they do what they feel like doing, they have to deal with consequences. But why don't they care? Because they're being led by their amygdala. And here's the real problem. If I don't have a parent who is being my prefrontal cortex, and my prefrontal cortex is already undeveloped, I'm really going to just let my amygdala go crazy. Did y'all understand what I just said? That's why, again, it's important to have parents who are there acting as a prefrontal cortex, setting some boundaries, because the prefrontal cortex of our kids aren't developed. And if that prefrontal cortex is not developed, the amygdala is the only thing left to guide our kids. And therein lies the problem. Guys, see, this is why it is so important for us to develop relationships with our kids. That's why it's so important. Because, listen, if their parents aren't being the prefrontal cortex, and they don't have a prefrontal cortex, they're going to do whatever the amygdala says do. Can I tell you something? The only hope our kids have is if somebody with a mature prefrontal cortex becomes a positive influence in their life and gets them to make good decisions. Can I tell you something? You might be the only person with a mature prefrontal cortex that kid knows. Those of you in this room may be the only hope that some of these kids have. Just from talking some things and going on the internet and looking at you guys at school, you know, you guys know what you're dealing with. It's no secret. You guys know what you're dealing with. And I'm suggesting that the way we can possibly help these kids is if we realize that, you know what, and see, because guys, you know, you guys aren't in the average school. This is just a little bit different breed, you know. And what I'm suggesting, that it may be as important here to be relational as it is to be educational. We develop a relationship with them through positive affirmations. See, everybody has an emotional bank account. And just like your bank account, if you don't put no deposits in it, you better not make withdrawal, or they're going to charge you $35. Ask me how I know. Never mind. But just like your bank account at the bank up the street, if you don't make deposits, you can't make withdrawals. And this is what I'm suggesting. If I don't make deposits into this child's emotional bank account, I don't have a right to make withdrawals. The right to make withdrawals is not because I'm the teacher, because they don't care you to teach it. It's not because we have rules in this school, and if you break these rules, you're going to go to in-school suspension. You're going to be suspended. They don't care. And if they don't care, if I kick them out of my classroom, we both lose. Because the goal is to educate that child. Whatever you give attention to, that's what you'll get more of. So if I continually give attention to bad behavior, guess what I'm going to keep getting? Because when they go home, are they getting any attention? No. So they want attention. So if I get no attention, and I know if I be bad in your class, you'll give me attention, I'll be bad just to get that attention. What would happen if I gave them attention for good behavior? Now, I'm not saying that's going to work in every case. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying this is a cure. And please don't, I'm not saying that I got the cure for every situation. I'm simply here trying to give us some suggestions. I'm simply here saying we have a problem. The problem is that prefrontal cortex is immature. They're being led by the amygdala. The bigger problem is their parents' prefrontal cortex act like it's not working. And so the only hope they have is if they can tap into the boundaries that we can set for them. And the way we do that is by being relational. So now the question becomes, how do we become relational? We become relational by making deposits into that emotional bank account, and we do that by telling them when they do good, I'm proud of you. If it's nothing but you've been to school every day this week, you've had a pencil and a piece of paper, you took notes, thank you. And what I'm suggesting, if we start giving attention to positive behavior, it might just be that we'll see more positive behavior.